Today, we're diving deep into Xiangqi, or Chinese chess, and what you're about to see is that this is so much more than just a game. It's basically a 3,000-year-old story of war, philosophy, and history, all crammed onto a simple wooden board.
All right, so here's the plan. First, we're going to look at the game as a map of history. Then we'll trace it all the way back from a game of pure chance to one of pure strategy. We'll see how the modern game got its final form, check out its cousins around the world, meet its greatest masters, and finally, ask why this ancient battlefield is still so popular today. So, let's kick things off with our big idea for this explainer. Xiangqi isn't just a game you play, it's a living document. You can think of it as a mirror, one that reflects ancient Chinese warfare, political ideas, and the culture of the time.
So let's just start with that question. What if every move you made, every piece on the board, and every line drawn on it actually told a story? Well, with Xiangqi, that's literally what you get. This board isn't a toy. It's a historical text, just waiting for you to read it.
Okay, let's go way back, all the way back to the beginning. To really get Xiangqi, you have to understand its ancestor, and you have to understand the huge philosophical shift that turned it from a game of fate into a true battle of wits.
You know, the earliest game we can trace this back to is called Liubo, and for more than 1,000 years, this was the game to play. But check out the key detail here. It was all driven by chance, by the roll of dice or the toss of sticks. It was almost more of a fortune-telling tool, like you were asking the gods for a little guidance.
And this slide just lays out that whole cultural shift perfectly. See, as military philosophy started to evolve, you had thinkers like Sun Tzu who were all about calculation and planning, not blind luck. So the game followed. The dice got thrown out, and it went from this cosmic fortune-telling thing to a pure military simulation. And get this, even the board changed. The pieces moved from being inside the squares to being on the intersections, the exact points where armies would actually clash. Pure strategy had officially replaced chance. So here's the kicker. This new game of strategy wasn't about some fantasy battle. Nope, it was based on a very specific and very real war. The incredibly bloody civil war between the Chu and Han kingdoms that literally created the Han dynasty. Every single game you play is a reenactment of that founding conflict.
And what's so cool is just how literal these connections are. You see that river that divides the board? That's not just any river. It's the Hango Canal, the actual military border where the Chu and Han armies stared each other down for months. And the palace that the general is stuck in? That's not just some random box. It represents the imperial city, reminding you that your #1 job is to protect the government. It's real history mapped right onto a game.
Okay, let's jump forward in time to the Tang and Song dynasties. This is where we see the game we know today really start to take shape. The final, game-changing pieces, quite literally, fall into place. So during the Tang dynasty, we start getting the first clear, written-down rules for how pieces like the chariot and the horse moved. But it's the Song dynasty that delivers the final knockout punch. Not only do we get a totally revolutionary new piece, but we have actual, physical proof from 1102 CE, a complete set of 32 flat, copper disc pieces, dug up by archaeologists that look just like the ones used today. And here it is, that revolutionary piece, the cannon. This piece is totally unique to Xiangqi. It captures by jumping over another piece, which is a direct simulation of the stone-throwing catapults that were dominating siege warfare back in the Song era. The second this piece was added, it completely changed the game, adding a whole new layer of long-range tactical threat. Now, to really appreciate what makes Xiangqi so special, it helps to look at its family. You see, it's part of a whole global tradition of games, but each one ended up telling a very different story.
So the great-great-grandfather of them all is this ancient Indian game called Chaturanga. It was meant to represent the 4 divisions of the Indian army. And as this game spread across the world, probably along the Silk Road, it started to adapt. It morphed to reflect the different cultures it ran into.
And this is where it gets so fascinating. Look at how each game became like a cultural fingerprint. Western chess created this all-powerful queen, which maybe reflects the rise of powerful female monarchs in Europe. Then you have Japanese shogi, which brought in the drop rule, letting you reuse captured pieces, a perfect mirror of the constantly shifting loyalties in feudal Japan. And Xiangqi? It kept its leader confined, a clear nod to the imperial hierarchy. And it added that cannon, focusing on the art of the siege. It's the same game ancestor, but 3 completely different worldviews.
So we've got the rules. We understand the history, but what about the strategy?
Let's jump to the era when Xiangqi's deepest secrets were finally written down, and the game took its first real steps toward becoming a professional sport.
The two most famous manuals are basically a perfect yin and yang. On one side, you have The Secret in the Tangerine, the ultimate book on attacking, teaching this hyper-aggressive, all-out, sacrificial style of play. And then, in response, you get the Plum Blossom Manual, which perfected the art of a patient, unbreakable defense. This eternal struggle, the unstoppable force versus the immovable object, still defines top-level play today.
And then, boom, the 20th century hits and the game just levels up. It goes from a folk pastime to a serious professional sport. It all started in 1956 when China made it an official national sport. After that came a women's championship, then a world federation to take the game global, and finally, a modern professional A-League. The ancient battlefield had become a modern arena.
So, after 3,000 years, why does this game not just survive, but actually thrive? What is its lasting legacy? Why do we still care?
Well, the game itself is a teacher. It teaches you about protecting the center, about the balance between offense and defense, and about the virtue of patience. But the most profound lesson, I think, is its rule on stalemate. See, unlike in Western chess where it's a draw, in Xiangqi, if you're left with no legal moves, you lose. The game demands that you always keep a path of action open. It's a philosophy that basically says inaction is failure.
And that's why it lasts. It doesn't matter if it's played in a royal court, on a park bench, or across the world on a phone app. Every single game is a connection. It plugs every player into this deep, flowing river of history, strategy, and culture.
So the next time you see a game being played, any game at all, it's worth asking yourself what ancient battles, what cultural values, what deep human stories are hidden just beneath the surface of that board.